Hello again, this is Ben Hitchcock Cross talking to you today from an undisclosed clubhouse. I want to talk to you about administrator contracts for Milwaukee Public Schools. What a fascinating topic, but I'm sure you'll agree with me that it may be. So let's start out here. I understand it that people have heard of, they've imagined, but nobody's actually seen any contracts that have for administrators at the city of Milwaukee's public schools. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about by law, all state contract, state education administrators need to have an administrator's license and a contract. And how do we know this? Okay, I'm pretty sure it's 118, but whatever. You go in there, and what are they called? There's the, a school district may hire a superintendent. It may hire a business administrator. If it does, there's rules for all of those things. And that they may authorize the superintendent to hire assistants to the superintendent. It's called the superintendent, the business administrator, and their assistants, or something like that. Those are the multi-billion-dollar of industry called educational administrators, K through 12. So what do they work under is the big question here, because if you don't have a contract, you don't really have work rules. If you don't have a contract, you don't really have a clear sense of how you can be terminated or not be terminated. And let's all be clear, throughout, let's say, the last 5 years, administrators without contracts have been terminated by Milwaukee Public Schools. They just don't have any contracts. So let's look at the organizational hierarchy for a second. In Milwaukee, you've got a superintendent, then you've got a deputy superintendent, in theory. These positions all shift around. Only the superintendent remains the same. Then there are a bunch of chiefs. Then it's administrator, manager, director, manager, and then specialist, I think, worker. I think that's how it goes. Okay. Well, from that position of director up until superintendent, those are all administrators. Director of literacy, director of transportation, director of food service, director of manager of all of those things, coordinator, whatever. And then there's going to be about 2 to 3 chiefs, which are the ones that the heads answer up to that. For example, facility and maintenance will ultimately answer to the chief of staff, chief of schools. Again, they switch these names so frequently, it's hard to keep up. So, by the way, I have seen a contract for the superintendent. There's a contract for the new superintendent. I've seen contracts for other various high-level administrators, but I've never heard of anybody seeing a contract for a principal. Never seen it. And so part of what the issue then is what is governing their behavior. And there's 2 problems with that's going, and we see one of them, we see very open and obviously, which is the problem of there being no rules, no due process. We can get into that in a second, but there being no rules, and that's bad for both the students and the parents and the administrators themselves. And normally the beneficiaries of a contract are the 2 people who are signing the contract. Sometimes it's a third party, right? I could engage in a contract with a daycare agency to take care of my minor child, for example. Okay. So then we ask ourselves, because ultimately, who wins in a situation like that? It's the chiefs. It's the autocracy. It's the superintendent who can then say, it's my way or the highway. They can then say, I don't care what the board says. You do what I tell you. And then ultimately, there's no real checks and balances between the board and the administration. And by law, the superintendent is not the king of a school district. But when there's no contracts in place for administrators, we're a step closer, and that's bad for parents, and it's also bad for teachers. Because again, there could be one rule for Jane, and there could be another rule for Jimmy, or even a third rule yet for I don't know, Devontae, and yet another rule for Jose, for example. I realize my names are woefully out of date, but we'll deal with that in a future time. So then the next question is, again, sort of what are the work rules? Now, they'll probably point to the handbook, but there's more to that in a contract, and there's more to it than just the work rules, which can be changed at any time. There's under what is it, if I break this work rule, am I going to get terminated? If I break 3, am I going to get terminated? What is it that spells out under the grounds upon which I can be terminated? So I know, so I can perform my job, and so that the citizens of Milwaukee can get the benefit out of the contract both ways. Now, the second issue that's in the statutes, besides saying that they have to have a contract, is that there's supposed to be a period of non-renewal. Now, non-renewal is how administrators are fired. And let me explain to you how this works. Okay? An administrator, in order to get another job as an administrator, needs to not be non-renewed. I know it's a double negative, but in this case, non-renewed is at least positive thing here. Maybe not for the subject. Okay. So there is a time period, and I believe in March for teachers and February for administrators, by which the administrator has to state their intention not to renew this person. Okay. And usually it's countermanded by the board. I'm not sure if it has to be, but in most districts, I believe that the non-renewal thing is countermanded by the board. Now, here's what they do. They go to the person, the gym teacher, the shop instructor, whatever, and says, hey, we are going to non-renew you just because. Not because you blew the whistle or you didn't play the president's child in the basketball team. Not because of those reasons, but just because of, hey, performance. And you can challenge that if you want publicly, but the board's going to agree with this anyway because you didn't do X, Y, or Z or whatever, or we're going to tell them you didn't do X, Y, and Z. So therefore, you should just resign and, hey, them's the breaks, kid, but at least you'll have a chance to get another job and your license, or at least your career, will be protected. That's the goal. And in my experience, somewhere between 50 to 70% of those people just resign. And so they do it every time. And I believe very strongly that the Wisconsin Association of School Boards and the Wisconsin Association of Superintendents both teach that practice to force people to resign. That's what it is in my mind. Resign or you'll lose and you won't have a career. That's what it is. So that, I think, is a big issue with why school teachers, school administrators, everybody needs a contract so that they understand both what the parameters are. Because the contracts normally say they can't be broken unless both sides agree to it. The contract will adopt, and this person can be fired if you can prove to the board that they violated X, Y, and Z rules. Okay? Or allegations or whatever else. This person can, has access to X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. And I've seen them say, they'll work at I've seen them say all sorts of things, to be honest. Pay for mandatory training, we'll give this, really car allowance, all sorts of things. But all of those, the fact that it's in writing and the fact that it's in state law that it needs to be in writing is probably for 2 reasons. Number 1, because we learned a lesson, and number 2, because we thought about what to do to make sure that the lesson that we learned didn't happen again. So lawlessness at Milwaukee Public Schools is what I'm trying to report. If somebody has seen a contract for a administrator in the wild, we'd like to see it. So let me know. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll keep you informed.